A 12-year-old boy who was arrested over the weekend for sending racist messages on social media to footballer Wilfried Zaha has been released by police as their inquiries continue.
It comes as official figures indicate exclusions in English primary schools because of racism are up more than 40%. But how do children end up racist? Well, joining us to discuss this is Dope Black Mums podcaster Karina White, who says that her daughter first experienced racism age 5. Karina believes that children need to be taught how to be anti-racist. Professor of Black Studies Kahindi Andrews, who says children learn racism from politicians and the media, and head teacher Paul Jackson, who thinks children need to hear from others who've experienced racism to understand the consequences. Good morning to all of you. Thanks very much for joining us this morning. And Karina, if I can start from you with you, because I'm staggered by these figures that we've just been hearing there. Exclusions in primary schools because of racism up more than 40%. And your child, a 5-year-old, has experienced this as well. I mean, what's going on here where children as young as that are experiencing racism?
You know, I think that it's learned experience for them, and anything that they're exposed to in their environment, they replicate in school, on a football pitch, and I think we really do need to look at what our children are consuming, what they're learning, and what sort of global citizens we're raising them to be. We spoke about this so much on our podcast recently, how we need non-Black mums to come together and really raise their children to be allies and to be anti-racist and to be global citizens.
And do you think it's coming from parents? You were talking there about, the outside influences, media, schools, the other voices that children are hearing. But where would you say is the first approach? Is it parents who need to be having these conversations? And what age do you think that should start?
My daughter's 10 now. When she was 5, that was her first experience of racism. So I didn't want to have a conversation with her at 5 to explain to her what racism is. And she wasn't prepared for that. So I do think that at least from age 4 or 5, we need to be having these conversations with our children. I'm not saying to sit your children down and say, don't be racist, learn about Black people and white people and Asian people. What I'm saying is, what do their books look like? Are we showing them diversity? Are we showing them and giving them a narrative other than Black people were enslaved and they were slaves and they're inferior to us? Because that can be a narrative at home, and then when they go into school, the Black history that we learn at school is about slavery. We don't learn about, the great kings and queens in Africa. We don't learn about Black musicians or Black engineers or inventors. The only Black history that the kids tend to be learning in school is about slavery. So if we're reinforcing these negative narratives about Black people being inferior or stereotypes, then what do we expect the children to be growing up to learn and to be like? Psychodynamic theory tells us that experiences in our childhood do form our personalities and our thoughts as adults. So we're just constantly giving children these negative stereotypes and negative experiences of Black people and other ethnicities, then we can't blame them for then growing up and developing these ideals that are discriminatory and racist.
OK. Kahindi, do you think we need to get to a stage now that it almost needs to be compulsory now in the curriculum that we are taught that the inventor of the traffic light system was Black, the inventor of the supercomputer is a Nigerian Black person, that the reason that why we can talk now over the internet is a software system called VoIP, invented by a Black woman in America? Do these things need to be essential and compulsory on a curriculum, and will that make a difference?
Well, definitely, I think we need to look at the curriculum of schools and also universities. We essentially are taught white supremacy from the day we were in primary school up until the day we go to university. And so actually the schools are a really key part of this. But I also don't think that we can avoid the bigger picture here. Media, politicians, we live in a racist society. Why on earth would we be surprised that children pick up racist ideas? And the evidence of this is very, very, very clear. So we saw the Brexit campaign, which was retroactive, which was all about immigration, deeply racist. Figures like Nigel Farage get mainstream. And then what happens is you have a massive spike in hate crimes. And if that's happening for adults, of course that's going to happen for young people. And so when the public debate is so poisonous, it's even on this show a couple of years ago, I was told if I don't like it, I should go home. And when that's the language that we're talking on mainstream TV before to go into, then obviously they're going to be predominantly racist stuff, right?
Yeah, well, Paul, we're losing you a little bit there, Kehinde, but go on, Sean.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm picking up, we have got a few sound difficulties, actually, with your line, Kehinde, so perhaps we can just have a look at that to see if there's a way of improving it. But, Paul Jackson, I just wanted to pick up with you this point about the curriculum. Kehinde there saying that we are taught white supremacy from an early age. I mean, do you think there needs to be a radical overhaul of the curriculum? Because it is definitely framed from a white perspective, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, I think we as individual schools have a real responsibility around the curriculum that we teach. We've got a national curriculum, but I think that we as school leaders need to take responsibility over our school's curriculum. And I think we forget that we've got a degree of flexibility about what we can teach. And we need to look at our own school communities and what those communities need. And we need to introduce into the curriculum the areas that we feel that we should cover. And that will be different in different communities. And where we've got multicultural communities such as that I teach in, there I think is less of a need, but there is still a need. But where we've got monocultural communities, we absolutely need to flood those schools with positive stories, with positive news, with that real message of equality, and celebrating the diversity that surrounds us.
Yeah, and Paul, and also, I think you've touched on some good points there, and the issue about teaching young kids what it feels like to be discriminated against. And there's a very famous experiment by Jane Elliott, an American teacher who was very prominent in the 1960s, just after the passing of Martin Luther King, and she took it upon herself to try and make a difference in her classroom. Let's just watch this. This is a clip of her speaking to white American children and teaching them about discrimination. And she uses an experiment called Blue Eyes, Brown Eyes. Let's have a little watch. I think this is amazing. Just to explain that, basically she splits her class, her white children, into those with brown eyes and those with blue eyes. And she says, right, the brown eyes are the bad kids. They're the ones that we're going to ignore for the rest of the day. They're going to get less privileges. And the blue eyes, you're the clever ones. You're the good ones. You're going to get more teaching. You're going to get a longer lunch hour. And what she found is by them adopting those roles, they actually started to treat each other differently. The brown-eyed kids were abused by the blue-eyed kids. In the morning, they were all friends. But just by prescribing this narrative, they changed their behaviour. And what we saw there at the very end as well, which I think is really essential, is that when it came to learning, the brown-eyed kids felt, well, we're the dumb ones, so they learnt slower. They didn't even pick up some of the lessons because that's what they were drilled into them. I thought it was just amazing, a really simple project which Jane Elliott did back in the 60s. Paul, that is something quite useful, I think, isn't it? And something that I feel should be adopted now. And it's sad to say that we need that 60 years later, but I think we probably do, don't we?
We've got to open our eyes as people in positions of responsibility to what that labelling does, to what that unconscious bias does to us. Because we've got the explicit teaching, but I think there's so much implicit that happens in schools and in society. We mentioned earlier there about kind of what it looks like on media, what it looks like on television. And I think there's so much underlying racism that we're not aware of. And we've got to do so much more of the implicit side of things and ensuring that the environment that we surround children with, that the books that we expose them to, the television we expose them to, that all of these elements are addressed in every single way.